good. How about you? Okay. Good morning.
Did you pass out a review for Monday?
I thought I did. Yes. If not, I can get you one.
Okay.
What's up there?
It was for class 5. I only have it for 4.
Did you do it Monday?
No, but I watch it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, about June. You find it helpful to be able to attend remotely?
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Yeah. Because sometimes Mondays are like hard for me to get over here, especially if I don't drive.
Yeah. That's why we do that to help make it a little bit easier.
I just have a question. So I got my background check done. And do I wait for an email or do I just phone?
I'm gonna actually answer that on camera
Okay.
because a lot of people are gonna have that.
I was,
I did get approved to take it, and I just have to wait to say. Nice. Very nice.
Okay, testing. Looks like audio is working. All right, YouTube people, if you could, let me know if you can hear me in the chat. So my YouTube people, let me know if you can hear me. All right. Almost ready here. All right, so the question is, one of the students went and got a background check, wants to know if there, if there's anything else I need to, what's the next step? Do they get an email? How does the process work? So when you go do your background check, they're not going to give you anything. Like they don't give you your fingerprints to submit or anything like that. It's all done electronically. You just show up for the appointment. They take your fingerprints and picture, you sign, and then you go home and nothing else happens. And, it can be a couple days and nothing has happened. So you start to wonder, well, what do I do now? You're waiting on an email from Prometric. So if you did your background check and then you registered for the test, you applied for the test, about 1 to 3 days later, after you apply, you're going to get an email from Prometric. It says record found. That means that they looked for that background check, they found it, they put it with your application, and they've sent it to the Board of Nursing. So you'll see pending approval, because the Board of Nursing is the one that has to approve you to test. So you do your background check, you apply for the test. Prometric looks for that background check, finds it. They send a whole packet to the Board of Nursing. The Board of Nursing looks at your packet, evaluates you to make sure that you're appropriate for, being for licensure, for certification. And then they, once they get that back from the Board of Nursing, they schedule your test. So you're going to get 2 emails from Prometric. One that should say record found, pending approval, and the second one should say approved. And then you'll get your test date.
See, it didn't come back. This is what I got. And I almost didn't open it.
Oh, that's actually new. Okay, so this is something new.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's messed up.
Oh, no, you're
But
fine.
the address or the email address, it was like weird.
Okay, yeah, so that's very good to know. Can you forward this to me? Okay, just forward it to foryourcna@gmail.com, if you would. And that way I'll do a blog article on it, because apparently they have a new process. So that it used to come from the approval used to come from Prometric, and it was an attachment, and it would just say, in the little block, it would say approved. So this is what
.gmail.
at gmail.com. So this is what it used to look like. Okay, each of these boxes. It would say record found and then pending approval. And then once you're approved, it would actually say approved there, and you would get your test date. So that's what it used to look like. And it was an attachment, and a lot of people wouldn't open the attachments for whatever reason. So it looks like they switched to a new format where it's no longer an attachment, it's an actual email that comes to you. But I'll write a blog article on that and put it on my website to help people
Like I said, I
out.
almost didn't open it because
Yeah, MQA, yeah, MQA CNA ZZZ. I mean, that it does look like spam, yeah, for sure. And it probably will get routed to spam in a lot of, because they're send out a lot of emails from that email address. So it probably will get routed to spam. Interesting. All right. So let me just take a quick peek over here. Thank you guys. Thank you, Maya. I appreciate your help. Great job. All right, so let's go ahead and get your score on your scores on chapter 7. So you did chapter 7 between last class and this one. It's another skills chapter, so there's not a whole lot there to learn. Does anybody have any questions on chapter 7 though? Anything I can help you with? All right, Christy. Thank you. Jane. Thank you. Nicole. Jamie. Thank you. Do you have 5 and 6 for me?
Yeah. 5, I got a 95, and then 6, I got a
Thank you. Novalee. Thank you. All right. I got everybody right. Okay. So today we have 3 skills we're going to learn. And we're actually going to do these a little bit out of order. We're going to start with the second one. So the 3 skills that we're going to learn today is transferring a patient from bed to wheelchair. Do you guys remember ambulate with a gait belt that we learned last class? Well, transferring is the exact same process, but instead of walking them, after we stand them up, we're going to turn them and sit them down in the wheelchair. But the body mechanics are the same. The gait belt is used the same way. The lifting technique is the same. You're going to count to 3. They have to feel the chair behind them before you sit them down. All of that is the same. There's no real difference there. The big difference is instead of walking after you stand them up, we're going to sit them down in the wheelchair. But we need to learn a little bit about wheelchairs, and you need to learn how to pivot somebody so they're sitting on the edge of the bed. So that's the new stuff that we're going to learn with wheelchair. But the transfer itself, you've actually already seen the principles that govern it. We're also going to learn how to feed a resident, and that's actually where we're going to start today. Okay, we're actually going to start with feeding a resident today. And I want to start here because it doesn't follow all the normal rules that we have. So it's kind of a rule breaker. And I want to get into the specifics of how it breaks the rules and why we don't follow certain rules for this one. And then the last one we're going to do today is Pericare. Pericare is hard for students to learn because you've got kind of this mental thing about it. It's personal care, like below the waist care. It's not hard. You guys actually already know all of the steps. You know to read the care plan and follow it. You know to use, to start with the opening. You know to use a barrier. You know that we have to use a privacy blanket. Gloves are indicated because we're in a bathing suit area. You know the linen rules. Don't hold the stuff against your uniform and discard anything you don't use. You know washing rules. Whatever we wash, we rinse. Whatever we rinse, we dry. We're going to check the water. We're going to have them check the water. We're going to use the leaves method because it's a wet body opening. So none of that changes. We know that the patient has to remain on the middle of the bed. Doesn't matter whether they're on their back or their side, they're always in the middle of the bed. So if we're going to turn them on their side, we scoot them toward us first so that after the turn, they're in the middle of the bed. Clean rolls toward me, dirty rolls away. So we're going to put the chucks under the patient using that. We know how to clean the basin because we clean all the basins the same way, and we know how to do the closing. So there's nothing new to learn. You know all of the steps to do this. We just have to put them all in order for you and demonstrate it so you can kind of put it in the right mind frame. But you know these steps already. What you have to kind of come to terms with is your own emotional reaction to doing this skill. And that's not something that I can really help you with. Practice is the only thing that's going to really matter there. But the biggest thing is when you're doing personal care, we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, but when you're doing personal care on somebody, it's really, really important that you come at it with the right attitude, that you're not shy and timid and hesitant, because your patients will pick up on that. If I go to my patient, oh, Miss Jones, I gotta, like clean you down there, my patient isn't going to let me anywhere near them, because I'm not portraying any sort of confidence in myself, any sort of professionalism, and the patient's going to be wildly uncomfortable with that. If I come in and say, Ms. Jones, I'm Patti, your CNA today, and I need to do some personal care on you, they're going to be much more receptive. So you're going to have to work on your approach here. And you can use any terminology you want. You can say Pericare. It's okay to use that term. Your patient knows what it is. Remember, you're never the first person to do a skill on a patient. By definition, if you remember, CNAs do normal, right? So normal is routine tasks on stable patients. Incontinence, sudden incontinence, new incontinence, that's not normal, is it? So who's going to be the first person to do pericare on a patient? The nurse. So the nurse is going to explain to the patient what's happening, what it's called, all of that kind of education stuff that nurses are really good at. So by the time you get there, they've had pericare done every 2 hours around the clock for as long as they've been incontinent. You're not the first person on the job here. They probably know pericare better than you do. So you can call it pericare. It's okay. But if you're not comfortable with that, you can call it personal care. I'm going to clean your, your underneath, however you want to say it is fine. But again, try to keep it professional. We don't want to say, I'm going to clean up your vajayjay now. I mean, that's not really the way that we want to explain what we're doing. That makes it a little too icky. Does that make sense? You'll also hear it called CARES, CARES, CARES. And that's a very common way to explain what we're doing. We're going to do CARES now. So it's kind of a variation of pericare, but that's probably the most common way you're going to hear it and see it out in the clinical arena. They just call it CARES. Good, makes sense. But we need to talk a lot about urinary tract infections, infection control, what incontinence is. So that's going to take up a little bit of a lecture to go over that as well. Okay. And then you'll have some practice time today. You should have about an hour and a half of practice today. So chances are I'll be done somewhere around 11:30-ish with my, maybe even a little bit before. We'll see, where we get with timing. And then on Monday, you should have about an hour and 45 minutes or so of practice. So lots of practice time built in to the classes from here on out. Okay. I do want to talk really briefly about next Wednesday, a week from today, you graduate. Isn't that crazy? It goes fast. So you guys graduate in a week. We don't do an actual formal graduation ceremony, so you don't invite your family. There's no real place for them to be. No capping gown, nothing like that. It is your day though, so if you want to bring cupcakes, knock yourself out. That's fine. But I have a lot of stuff to go over with you. It's not just graduation. We're going to we take a class photo. So whatever you got to do with your hair and makeup, we do take a class photo. I do post it on Facebook. So if you're in the witness protection program, don't line up, But we're going to talk about employment. We're going to talk about continuing education, how to renew your certification, because getting it is only step one. You got to know how to keep it once you get it. And it amazes me how many people go through this process. It's expensive. You had to pay for class, you had to buy scrubs, you had to pay for the test and the background. You put out a lot of money for this. You want to keep that certification. Don't let it expire, because when it expires, you can't work as a CNA. And then you're going to come to me 2 years later and say, oh no, I let it expire and now I've got to renew and I don't know what I do. Well, what you do is start all over again. And that's a lot of expense. You don't want to do that. Keep your certification active. But now you need to know how to keep your certification active so it doesn't expire. We're going to spend some time talking about that on Wednesday as well. Okay. So even though it's graduation on the form, there's so much more that we do. So don't skip that class. That's probably one of the most important classes. The first one and the last one are super important for you to actually be here for. Make sure you bring your blue books back as well. Okay. So let's get started here. We're going to go to page 75 in your white book. How do we know what to do with each patient? The care plan. So if you learn nothing else in this class, you've learned that, right? Our care plan at the top of the page tells us to feed the resident a snack who is unable to feed him or herself. So let's stop there for a second. If your patient is able to feed themselves, they will. We're not involved in that. Anything the patient can do on their own, we're going to encourage them and enable them to do those things on their own to remain independent. So you need to be very aware of that. Why this becomes important is because sometimes your patients might be able to feed themselves, but they're going to need accommodations. Like they may need a special plate guard, or they may need special utensils, or maybe they need finger foods, things that they can pick up and eat on their own. So it's important for CNAs to really understand this, that just because somebody can't feed themselves independently the way we would eat doesn't mean that they forfeit their right to feed themselves. Okay. It's your job to know what accommodations the patient needs based on the care plan and make sure those accommodations are met. So a question that you might see on the state exam on this would be something like, you're assisting a patient with Parkinson's at mealtime. Their care plan calls for a plate guard and a curved spoon. And you can't find those items. What is an appropriate action to take? A, change his diet to finger foods. B, ask the nurse to help you locate these items. C, feed the patient because you're running out of time. Or D, call occupational therapist and request a replacement set. What do you guys think? Yeah, we're going to ask the nurse to help us find those items. We can't change the patient's diet order. We can't feed them on our own because that makes them dependent. It removes their dignity. And we can't order another set. So by process of elimination, we should be able to figure that out. The point here is that if the patient has it on the care plan to use specialized feeding utensils, it's our responsibility to make sure we're actually using them. Okay. All right. So at the bottom of the page here, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back here. The resident is sitting in a chair in an inappropriate position for eating. Let me talk about that. Most care plans aren't going to say that. The only reason this care plan does is because if you look at the bottom of the page, you're going to see that you're going to be feeding a live testing student. So one of you guys might actually be the patient for this. If you're the patient for this, you're going to get some very specific instructions when you're the patient. So our care plan tells us the patient's sitting in a chair. You can see that down here. So when you are the patient for this, they're going to put you in a chair They're going to put a table in front of you just like this, and somebody's going to feed you. But they need you to be in an inappropriate position for eating. So they're going to tell you to slouch or slump. Well, some of you aren't real good at slouching and slumping, and you might just do something like this. And this isn't like really obvious that it's not a good eating position, right? We want the patient upright, but sometimes it's hard for you to see. That's why it's in the care plan. The care plan is telling you, hey, no matter what your eyes are telling you, they're not sitting upright. So what do you think is going to be a critical step on this? Yep, getting them sitting up, because our care plan is telling us, don't trust your eyes. Does that make sense? Now, some people will get really creative with this and kind of be all over backwards or sideways or whatever. But most people, when they're slouching and slumping, they might just do something like this. And this isn't really, I eat like this sometimes, you know? So they need to make it very, very clear for you that that's a critical step. Does that make sense? Okay, it also tells us to document the intake on the food and fluid intake form. You can see that in the middle of the step-by-steps. So this is our documentation form. If you turn in your books to page 120, it's either 122 or 124. I can't remember which one. Nope. Sorry. Let me find it. Should be 120. I was so close.
You were close.
Page 120. Those are the actual documentation sheets from the state exam. So it's a bigger version of this. You can see it there. And you would document on the food and fluid intake form. That's the one that you're going to document. Now, if you notice their check boxes, it just has a section for snack or meal. We're going to get to that in a minute. And it has check boxes for how much the patient ate and how much the patient drank in percentage form. So we're going to get to that in just a few minutes, but go back to page 75. And let's go back up to the care plan for a second. Feed the resident a, what does it say? Snack. So on that food and fluid intake form, the very first section asks whether you fed them a snack or a meal. What are you going to check off? Snack. The care plan is telling you guys, check off snack. Even if you consider a thing of pudding a meal, care plan says snack. Okay, good. Questions? Feeding does not follow the rules. It just doesn't. It doesn't follow the rules in a lot of different ways. But one of the first is that we're not going to use a barrier. So every other skill, we got a chucks or a barrier, put it on the table first, got our supplies and put those on the barrier. But our food tray is our barrier. And we're finally using this table for what it's supposed to be used for. So we aren't going to use a barrier for this skill. If you want to, you can, it's fine. If you want to go get a barrier and put it there, but it actually kind of makes the patient a little uneasy. Why are you putting this medical thing on the table that I'm getting ready to eat off of? So this can cause some confusion with your patients. It's best to leave it off, but it's not a checkpoint. So if you forget and use a barrier, it's okay. It's the only skill that we aren't going to close the privacy curtain. Now this is, I'm going to sit for this one. This is pretty important, actually. You don't want to mess this up. You don't want to pull the curtain. And it's kind of hard because we pull the curtain for everything, even range of motion, like things you wouldn't think we need a curtain for. But we don't for feeding. And that's because eating is a social event. People tend to gather in groups to eat. Think about, dinner with your family. People, like all of our major life milestones are usually centered around food. What do you have at birthday parties? Food. What do you have at graduations? Yeah, absolutely. Baby showers, weddings, even funerals center around food, right? So we tend to engage socially when we eat. Now, it goes a step further. Not only is eating a social event, but you, being the person at the bedside, need to be the one socializing the patient. So one of our rules here is that you have to have a conversation. And this is different than any other skill that we do, because every other skill we might be, our talking to the patient might be centered around what we're doing. I'm going to lift your arm towards your shoulder like you're making a muscle. We're going to do that 3 times. I'm going to take your vital signs now. I'm going to turn you on your side so I can put some pillows behind you. We're telling them what we're doing. You can't do that with feeding. If I said, okay, I'm going to put some pudding on the spoon now and it's coming to your mouth, that's very patronizing. We don't want to do that. Patients know how to eat. So this is different because you're graded on actual real conversation. And the conversation doesn't have to be factual for the test. You can say something like, they're showing a movie on the big screen in the activity room later. Do you want to go? Or I heard the bingo jackpot is up to like $2.10 and Mabel thinks she's going to win it. Are you playing? You can talk about, I really hope they have those little kids come in for Easter this year. Last year was so cute. They were just with these little bunnies and chick. Make something up. But you need to have a conversation for the test. Now, I actually do this for real. When I'm working with a patient, I try to find out a little bit about them. And the longer I'm working with them, the more I'm going to know about them. But one of the questions I like to ask, especially if I don't know the patient real well, is what's the most exciting place you've ever been? Because most people have been somewhere and done something that they consider exciting. Most people will actually kind of go through a whole movie reel in their head and go, well, it might have been that time I went to London, or maybe it was the time I went to Vegas. They may give them a lot of different opportunities for conversation. Does that make sense? The other thing you can do is look around their environment. People post pictures of things they're willing to talk about. We don't post pictures of our deepest, darkest skeletons in our closet. We post pictures of things we're willing to talk about. I have a photo that's hidden right now behind the banner, but that photo is out in the public. So if you saw it and you asked me about it, I would feel very comfortable talking about it because I put the picture up, right? So if your patient has mementos or pictures or drawings or artwork, it means something to them. You can ask about it. What I like to do, especially with my older women, you'll learn how to get really good at this. But if I'm working with an older woman, especially if she doesn't have a really good appetite, because depression is real, guys, in these facilities. Depression is real. And I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But if I'm working with an older woman and she's got an old black and white photo on the wall, I'll point to that photo and go, oh my gosh, look at them. They're gorgeous. Were they movie stars? Did you know them? And watch her sit up a lot straighter and say, oh no, honey, that's me. Now I've made her day. I've given her a boost, a psychological boost. And do you know what that's going to cause her to do? Eat better. Yep. Yeah. So I will absolutely use the things in her room to improve her overall mood and outlook to get her to eat more. And now I can ask, where was that taken? What branch did he serve in? Did you guys get married? Or was he the one that got away? I'll use a lot of humor. And what that does is it opens up an area of conversation, but it will ultimately improve their appetite and kind of give us some common ground. So remember, the things that are in your patient's area are things they're willing to talk about. Don't be afraid to use them. I actually met a man that was knighted by the Queen of England. That's pretty amazing. I met somebody, an engineer that worked during the Apollo mission at NASA. I mean, how exciting is that? He was there when we went to the moon. Crazy. Don't be afraid to look around and ask questions about what you see. You can always use their family as well, particularly if their family visits quite often. But make sure that you're engaging with those patients. So we don't close a privacy curtain because socialization is important. We want to make sure we're having a conversation. Now, we don't ask people to talk with their mouth full, but you don't talk with your mouth full either. If we went into Chili's after lunch today, well, let's go to Cody's because it's buy one, get one for fajitas today, right? Let's go to Cody's. So if we went over to Cody's after class today and we walked in and there were 50 other couples in there, groups of people, because it's buy one, get one fajita day, right? So they're going to be packed. If we walked in there and it was dead silent with all those people in there, how awkward would that feel? You expect a certain amount of noise in a restaurant. You expect conversation in a restaurant. So they're not talking with their mouths full. They're chewing while somebody else is talking. And then in between, when that other person takes a bite, they start talking. We have conversations when we eat. Taking that conversation part out of it becomes extremely awkward. And I've seen a lot of CNAs do this. They'll stand there and stare at the TV while they're shoveling food into somebody else's mouth. And that is horribly impersonal. But what do you think that makes a patient feel like? How would you feel? Yeah, absolutely. A job. Yeah. It affects their self-esteem. They start to feel feelings of worthlessness and depression and dependence. And we really, really need to be aware of that. So if I'm spending all of this time talking about it, how important do you think this is on the test? Very. It's not the feeding that you're being graded on. It's how you're making the patient feel while you're feeding them that you're being graded on. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're not going to use a barrier. We're not going to close a privacy curtain. We're going to have a conversation, and the conversation is going to be graded. It's the only skill where your conversation is graded, and it's the only skill that you're required to sit. You have to pull up a chair and sit, because if you're standing over somebody putting food into their mouth, that further enhances that inferiority and dependence. People will feel very rushed. They will not eat appropriately. It sets up this whole cascade event, because now they're thinking you've got better things to do than feed me. So they'll take 3 bites. They'll say, I'm done. Because they think that somebody else needs your care more. And that's the impression you're giving them. We had this one little lady, she was losing weight. This is long-term care. She was losing weight. I mean, she was losing weight. And she was down under 80 pounds. She was losing weight. And I happened to, I'd look, and she wasn't eating very well. And, the nurses were getting in touch with the doctor for appetite stimulants. We had some things that we tried. I would bring her Frosties I'd stop at Wendy's and buy a Frosty and give it to her. And she would eat that. But her food intake, because you're going to document all this, was like 25%, 10%, just horrible. But I happened to walk by the room one day when the CNA was feeding her, and the CNA was literally standing at the bedside, facing the TV, doing this. And no wonder her intake was poor. My intake would be poor, and I like food, right? But my intake would be poor too, because now you're making me feel a certain kind of way that is affecting my appetite. So we've got to be super careful about our indirect cues here with this one. So you want to make sure that you've got an open stance, your face is very pleasant, you're smiling, you're making eye contact, you're being very encouraging and open without being patronizing. And we're not going to use any childlike feeding techniques. No planes, trains, or automobiles, no race cars. You'll know as you get through your career, there are some people that I've been able to kind of play around with. I use a lot of humor. I think humor heals. So there are some that I could kind of play around. I would never do this to my grandmother. Oh my goodness. She was prim and proper, and no, you're not going to use a race car with her, because she'll tell you why you're wrong. So, you can use some humor, but not for the test. And I would not use humor with anybody I did not know very well. Right. But yeah, I have used race cars in the past to get somebody to smile. But we have to remember that that can be construed as demeaning. We never treat adults like children. Does that make sense? Good. So let's talk about dementia patients for a second. And what I'm about to say can be pretty controversial. Dementia patients, it's not uncommon for dementia patients not to recognize hunger, because their brain is broken. The connections aren't working. So let me explain to you a little bit about dementia, because this might help you a little bit when you're working with dementia. When you're in this class, right, you're creating memories. You will remember this class. Some of you will remember it more than others, but there's things that go into that memory. The memory isn't this tight ball that is completely self-contained. There are things that this memory is going to share with other memories. So this room is usually pretty cold, right? So your feeling of cold is going to be tied to this memory. You go to Duncan. So Duncan is going to be tied to this memory. You're wearing blue, you're wearing black. So your black uniform is going to be tied to this memory. You don't want to forget your jacket. So a jacket is going to be tied to this memory. You use a spiral book. So spiral books are going to be tied to this memory. The way the room smells is going to be tied to the memory. So your memories are not these like all-inclusive bubbles where every component is all tightly wound together. Memories create more of a web effect. So cold over here, black scrubs over here, jacket over here, Duncan over here. And your brain will kind of take little pieces of that and pull it all together to create that memory. Does that make sense? So memories are more of a web effect. When you have dementia, those little pieces are all still there. What's missing is the web that connects them. Does that make sense? So remember that cold is shared by a lot of different memories. So if the patient gets cold, they may be able to access a memory cold from 1932, because memories that we make when we're young stick better than memories we make when we're older, because your brain is a memory making factory. It's what it does. Your brain creates memories. Now, if I was to invent something, this thingamajig, whatever, and I was going to get a factory to make it, would I want an old, rusty, broken down factory that only works half the time and some of the gears are missing some of the teeth? Or do I want a brand new state of the art factory that's working at top peak performance? Which one's going to give me the best pen? Yeah, brand new. When you were born, your memory making factory is brand new. So the memories that you make when you're young are going to stick. The memories you make when you're 80 are not, because that particular day, those factories may not be online today. Oh, no. What happened? Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I can't see it behind me. Let's see, am I still on? Oh, I'm on. Okay. All right. So does that make sense about the memories? So here's the problem with dementia. A lot of times your dementia patients will feel something, but they don't know how to explain it because they don't have the right connections in their brain. So we had a woman who all she could say was apple, apple. So we tried applesauce, we tried apples, we tried apple pie. Turns out apple meant cold. She was cold. Now, she may have somewhere along the line gone apple picking and gotten cold. I don't know. I have no idea how that association was made in her brain. I have no idea. But for her, apple was cold. We put a sweater on her and she was, maybe the sweater that she wanted was apple red. I don't know. But when we're working with dementia patients, it can be particularly tricky to try to figure out what they're feeling or they're saying or they're trying to convey to us because they don't have the connection ability. Does that make sense? Now, this is important when we're feeding somebody with dementia, because the dementia patient may not be able to recognize that they're hungry, and they may resist sitting down to eat. So when we're working with dementia patients, we have to meet them where they are. That means that some of our dementia patients may be wandering around the facility munching on a carrot stick or a string cheese, or we might give them a sandwich that's cut in quarters, a little quarter of a sandwich, or as you pass them in the hallway, you might want to ask, do you want some crackers? We try to get their nutrition in where we can, because it's not always feasible to get them to sit down because their bodies aren't responding to that hunger awareness. Does that make sense? Okay. That's really kind of important for you to understand. So feeding is different. It doesn't follow a lot of our normal rules. Remember that conversation is going to be very, very important, and we never, ever want our patient to feel rushed. So in addition to all of that, we've got a couple of other things that we have to think about with this particular skill. We're going to offer a hand wipe before we feed them. Now, I know we're doing the feeding, and this messes a lot of students up because, well, if I'm feeding them, why do they have to wash their hands? And there's two reasons for this. Number one is infection control. Just because we're feeding them doesn't mean they're paralyzed. They may still have the ability of bringing their hands up to their face if something is dribbling out, and you don't want dirty hands up near a patient's holes, right? So we want their hands to be clean just in case they are helping out with feeding. That's number one. But the second reason is more psychological. Washing hands is usually part of the eating ritual. Most people go wash their hands before they eat. And if you don't, you should, because your hands have touched all kinds of stuff. So hand washing is part of the eating ritual. And a lot of times it'll help stimulate that appetite. We want to offer a clothing protector. We're not going to force it on them. We're not going to put it on them. We're going to offer it. Do you want a clothing protector? Me, I need one. Everything I eat ends up on me. I'm physically incapable of eating without wearing some of it. My grandmother would not want a clothing protector because I am not a child, right? So we're going to offer, but we're going to let them lead. We're going to offer a drink before feeding and every 2 to 3 bites. Now, this is patient preference. I can't stress this enough. Everyone has different eating habits. My aunt used to drink an entire cup of like that size of water before she ate any meal because she swore it filled her up and she ate less. Doesn't work for me. Doesn't work for me. But she would insist on drinking an entire glass of water before she ate. Me, I drink with my meal because I don't really have a lot of saliva, so it's hard for me to swallow things. I need to drink with my meal to help with the digestive process. My husband doesn't drink at all while he's eating. It's after he eats. So everybody has a different preference here. We're going to offer before and every 2 to 3 bites along the way, just to encourage that fluid intake. They can say no, perfectly okay. They can say no, but we're also going to do the same with food because everybody has different eating preferences as well. Some of you guys don't like your foods to touch. Like everything has to be separate on the plate. Some of you like your corn and mashed potatoes mixed. Yeah. Some people like to eat their salad first, very common in America. Some people like to eat their salad last, very common in certain European areas. Some people eat dessert first because life is short. Some people eat dessert last if they've got some room. So everybody has little different idiosyncrasies when they eat. There's another one that some people aren't so familiar with, and you're going to see this sometimes with your older, particularly Southern ladies. But back in the day, apparently, I wasn't alive back then, but back in the day, apparently, women were taught not to bring stuff to their mouth and take a bite out of it. So everything needed to be cut up and brought up with a fork. So this was more society. I wasn't raised in society, but this was apparently a thing. I had no idea this was a thing.
It's military too.
Is it military too? Yeah, I had no idea this was a thing. We had a woman that wouldn't eat when we served pizza or fried chicken or hamburgers, and nobody could figure out why. And then her family actually clued us in and said, oh no, she would never bring something up and take a bite. You have to cut it up for her. You have to cut up pizza? Yes, you have to cut up pizza. So that's good to know, right? It's always best to get the information from the patient when possible. But if the patient is non-communicative, we have to go to the family for more information. But we're going to ask the patient, what do you want first? What do you want next? We're going to feed them the way they want to be fed. A couple years ago, well, more than a couple now, I was working hospice, and one of my patients was in a nursing home. I went to the nursing home every day to see different patients. I was in there all the time. And I went down to the dining room because it was lunchtime, and this patient had had a stroke and was unable to speak, and she was paralyzed on the right side. But she was very expressive with her eyes and her face, and she could really get the point across, even though she was unable to speak, and she had to be fed. And I went in and I sat down and I looked at her plate and I went, oh, Mary, what are we having today? That does not look appetizing. It was just this big, because it was pureed. She had swallowing difficulties. This big goop of gray on her plate. That's all it was, just this big gray mound on her plate. I'm like, oh, that doesn't look right. So I asked the CNA that was feeding her, what's for lunch today? And she said, Salisbury steak, mashed potatoes, and beets. I said, okay, but what's that? She said, Salisbury steak, mashed potatoes, and beets. I just mix it all together. I said, You would eat beets and potatoes mixed together? And she says, no, that's gross. Okay, but you just mixed her beets and potatoes. She says, no, it's pureed. There's no taste to it. No. Pureed does not mean no taste. It's not bland. Pureed means they don't have to chew. The taste is still there. She goes, oh, that's gross. And Mary, the patient's like rolling her one eye as hard as she can. She's like, I know. So be aware that pureed really does retain taste. It has a different texture, but it retains taste. Don't just mix everything together for your patients. Find out how they eat and feed them that way. Otherwise, they're not going to eat well. Good? Makes sense? We're going to let the patient lead. Don't speed this up. Let the patient lead. We're going to feed slowly, and the spoon should only be half full at any time. And we're not going to use any childlike feeding techniques for this. So when we document, we're going to document based on percentages. So everything I just talked to you about is on page 72 and 73. You can go through that on your own if you want to. There's some questions there on 73 in the gray box. You can test your own knowledge. But when it comes to documentation, most places are going to have you document percentages. In order to document percentages, you have to know what you started with. If somebody has a cup of pudding and they eat all of that cup of pudding, they ate 100% of what was offered. But if that cup of pudding is on a tray with a sandwich and some chips and some peaches, and all they ate was the cup of pudding, did they eat 100%? No, they only ate 25% of what was offered. Does that make sense? You have to know what you're starting with to identify percentages. Now, most percentages are going to be based on a 25% scale. 0 means they didn't touch it. 25% means they kind of picked at it. They ate a little bit. 50 means they ate half. 75, they ate most. 100, clean plate club. So if you look on page 74, there's an activity for you. I think I have that here. Let me see. So here's an activity for you. This is a little bit different than what you see on page 75. But if we start with this, if we have a cup of fluid, we have some broccoli, a sandwich, and some Jell-O, and we go to pick up the plate after the patient ate, and this is what we pick up, they just kind of picked at it a little bit. So what could we call that on our percentage? 25%, yeah. This one, they pretty much ate half, so what would we call that? 50%. This one, they ate most, but they left behind some broccoli and some Jell-O. So can we say that they finished it? So what are we going to call that? Okay, and then this one, yeah, 100%. We got some drippings. Yeah. So we need to know how to estimate percentages. Now, fluid, on the other hand, for the test is going to be percentage, just like feeding. But in a clinical setting, we don't use percentages for fluid much. Most of the time, it's going to be hard numbers. Now, to learn this, you have to know how to convert. So 1 ounce, because here in America, we use ounces. In medicine, we use cc's or mLs. It's the same thing, just 2 words for the same thing. cc's or mLs. So we have to learn how to convert those ounces into mLs. 1 ounce is equal to 30 cc's or mLs. So when we have something that maybe is 12 ounces, we have to convert that into 360 cc's to document. So in order to do that conversion, we're going to take the number of ounces, multiply it by 30 to get our number. So 8 ounces If we multiply 8 by 30, we get 240. 6 ounces, if we multiply 6 by 30, we get 180. So there at the bottom of page 74, you'll see 3 cups or 3 liquids. Go ahead and do the conversion there. 6 ounces, we're going to multiply 6 by 30. 8 ounces, and the milk carton actually tells you how many mLs, and 12 ounces, 12 times 30. Now, at the end of your shift, you're going to add all of those up to calculate intake and output. So this would be intake. So you would add together the 180, the 240, and the 360. Can anybody do that math? 780. So at the end of the shift, you would add all of that up and get 780, and that would be your total intake for the shift. Good. Any questions on documentation? Yeah, I know. And you will have at least one math question on the test. So you're either going to have a conversion question. It's going to say you have 8 ounces of fluid. How many cc's are you documenting? Or you're going to have an addition question that gives you 3 or 4 amounts, and you have to add them together for the intake. No, but it's easy math. Yeah, it's easy math. Yeah, it's easy. Just the best thing to do is, if you have 8 ounces, just 8 times 3, and then add the 0 at the end. Okay. But yeah, you will. And these aren't what we call those critical concept questions where, it would be an automatic fail on the test. If you miss the math question, it's not an automatic fail. But this is kind of important in a clinical setting. So this is something you really want to learn how to do. The reason is that a lot of times your fluid intake and output is going to clue us in that there's a problem with the patient long before they develop any other signs. So if we have a patient who is taking in 800 cc's a shift in fluid, but they're only peeing 300 cc's a shift in fluid, over time, that's going to cause them to swell up, right? Because they're taking in more than they're excreting. It should be a rough balance. You're going to lose a little bit, but it should be a pretty rough balance. Well, if they're taking in 800, but they're only excreting 300 in urine, where is the rest of it going? It's going into the tissues. Well, our next question should be, why? Why is the patient retaining fluid? So as a nurse, I'm looking down intake and output sheets, looking for these discrepancies. And then I'm going to go in and try to figure out if the patient's got a heart problem or a kidney problem. Because chances are it's one of those two. And I need to find out pretty quick. But I want to find that out before they start having breathing difficulties, or before their kidneys shut down, or before we have some really, really big neon light problems. If I can catch it super early, we can do something about it. Does that make sense? Is that good? So this is why intake and output is so important, and we got to get this math dialed in. Okay, so we talked a little bit about these medical abbreviations earlier in the program, but I want to bring to your attention that NPO again. NPO means nothing by mouth. This is something you probably will see on the written test. You absolutely need to be aware of what that means. That's one of the few medical abbreviations that will show up on the test. NPO means nothing by mouth. So here's our checklist. This is what we're going to be graded on. The patient must be sitting fully upright, and our care plan tells us that they're not. So we're going to have to say something to get them upright. We're going to offer a hand wipe and a clothing protector before we feed them. We're going to sit down while we're feeding them. We're going to offer a drink before and every 2 to 3 bites. We're going to give them small bites. A spoon should only be half full. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to encourage the patient to eat. We're going to leave the area around the mouth clean afterwards, so wipe up the mouth. And of course, we're going to document. Now, remember I said that when you're a patient for this, you're going to get very specific instructions. They're going to tell you to sit down and slouch, right? But they're also going to tell you to only take 4 bites and then refuse. So if you're being fed, and it's either pudding or applesauce, a small cup, if you're being fed, you're going to take 4 bites and then you're going to say, no, thank you, I'm done. No matter what they say after that, no, thank you. I'm full, I'm finished. I'm not, however you want to say it, but you're not going to eat any more than 4 bites. Now, what they're grading the CNA on, the candidate that's being tested, is what they do when you stop eating. You need to encourage the patient using at least 2 encouragement methods. So something like, are you sure you don't want just 1 more bite? That works. Remember, you can always get further with patients by being nice than being mean. You want to maybe offer them something different. Have you ever had one of those days where you wanted something, you went and made it, you took a bite and you're like, nope, not it. Not what I was looking for. Maybe your patient's got that problem right now. They don't have a kitchen to go to where they can make something different. So offer something else. Can I get you a sandwich or some crackers from the nutrition room? Is this not working for you? Offer something else. And you can always remind them that they do have food available later if they get hungry. So, okay, you don't want any more now? Well, if you get hungry later, let me know. You need to use at least 2 of those. Are you sure you don't want just 1 more? Can I get you something different? There's food available later. So that way your patient, because a lot of times with especially our elderly that are in institutions, congregate living, they become difficult to feed because usually they get depressed. Let me explain to you how this happens. Very few people wake up in the morning and go, you know what? I think I'm going to check myself into a nursing home. So if these people aren't checking themselves into the nursing home, how are they getting there? Family in some cases, but okay. So usually what happens are these individuals are living at home. So let's talk about Mabel. Mabel lives across the street in Timber Pines, the housing community. She and her husband, Frank, retired down here many years ago from New Jersey. And she never learned how to drive because up in New Jersey, they were a block away from the bus stop and she only worked 3 blocks down the road. So she never really learned how to drive. Frank always did all the driving. When they retired down here, Frank continued to do the driving. And they had a little golf cart that they, rode all around Timber Pines, and they were involved in the bridge club and they played tennis and they were super active. And then one day Frank didn't wake up. So now Mabel is all alone and she has to figure this whole thing out because she doesn't drive. And there is no bus that comes a block from her house. So she takes driving lessons and she gets her license at the super young age of 78. I'm sure you've seen her on 19. And it's not so bad because at Timber Pines, there's a little access road that goes over to Winn-Dixie where she can get her prescriptions and Big Lots. And, she doesn't have to drive too far, except for once a month, she has to go all the way down 19 to her doctor's office. And on this particular day, she got some bad news at the doctor's, and he wants to put her on a new medication that she can't really afford. And she's all in a tizzy over it. And she thought she put the car in reverse, but she actually put it in drive. And the insurance company said, this is the 3rd time you've done that. We're not insuring you anymore. So she called her daughter all upset. And her daughter still lives in New Jersey. And she says, I don't know what I'm going to do. And the daughter says, all right, Mom, why don't you move back up here with us? And Mabel says, I can't take the cold anymore. And you're so busy with your kids. I don't want to be a burden. That's not going to work for me. I really need to stay here. So her daughter says, all right, I'll come down this weekend. We'll sort it all out. Just sit tight. So her daughter, Janet, hops a flight on Thursday and comes down. And she takes her mom out to lunch. And she says, Mom, if you're not willing to come up there, then we have to have a plan in place for you to stay here. So this is what my brother and sister and I have decided. You need to go to an assisted living facility because we all have jobs and families and we can't just pack up and move down. So it's time for you to go to an assisted living facility. We found one that's perfect. I talked to them on the phone. They're super nice. I looked at pictures of the rooms, but you have to pay out of pocket for these places. It's not covered by any insurance or anything. And right now it's about $4,800 a month. So we're going to have to sell your house. I mean, there's no way around that. It's got to be sold. So we're meeting with a realtor this afternoon. And the room that you're going to be in is a shared room. They told me that the roommate that you're going to have is super nice. There shouldn't be any problems, but it's kind of small. So you can only take 2 suitcases of stuff with you. So you've got to go through your whole house and figure out what 2 suitcases full of stuff you're going to take with you. And your dog, Sadie, she can't go. That's not a pet friendly facility. I know you've had Sadie for like 12 years and you're super attached, but she can't go, Mom. She's a perfectly lovely dog. I'm sure that somebody will adopt her at the pound, but we have to take her and drop her off. And the car, Mom, you can't drive the car anymore because you don't have insurance and it's kind of dented up anyway. We're going to give the car to your lawn guy because he's got a young family. He's just starting out. Let's give him the car. So we got a lot of stuff to do. You're checking in on Saturday. And here it is Thursday afternoon. We got a lot of stuff to do. And I got to be on a flight on Sunday to go back. I've got a presentation at work on Monday. So Mabel's just sitting there reeling because her entire life just collapsed. She just lost her independence, all of her money, her home, her car, her dog, all of the possessions that she has accumulated over her entire lifetime. And on Monday morning, you walk into her room and she throws the phone at you. Now you immediately think she is a mean old lady. She's not mean. She's heartbroken. Now, how well do you think she's going to eat? This is why these rules are so important, because our patients are in a position of life that we can't even begin to comprehend. If your entire life was just swept out from under you, you still wouldn't have the same reaction because for them, this is the end of their life. For you, you would be able to rebuild. You can't understand their mindset because you're young. But this is devastating. Absolutely devastating. And we need to keep that in mind when we're working with these patients. Does that make sense? Now, that's assisted living. Nursing homes, believe it or not, way worse than that. Way worse. Because you don't just make a reservation. To get into a nursing home, something has to go wrong with you physically. And then you go to the hospital and get horrible news that something is very wrong physically. And you can't go home. They won't let you go home. You are not allowed to make that decision to go home. You are about to be held against your will. And you're going to be in a facility where they're going to monitor you and keep you from running away. It seems a whole lot like prison. And that's how a lot of your patients are going to react to this. And they're going to say things like, when did it become a crime to get old? or to get sick. So we need to make sure that our approach to them is compassionate and caring and understanding. And when they throw that phone at us, we get really good at ducking because they have every right to be angry. I would be through no fault of their own. You know, I have retirement plans. I'm getting to that age, right? I'm thinking about retirement. Still have a ways to go, but I'm thinking about it, right? None of my retirement plans, not a single one of them, involve an assisted living facility or a nursing home. Not a single one of them. Maybe a nice place on, you know, on a Mexican beach somewhere. Maybe a cruise around the world. Maybe that trip to Alaska I've been putting off, or maybe just having the time to enjoy my house and my property and my family. But not a single one of my plans includes an assisted living or nursing home. So if I end up in one of those, what do you think my attitude is going to be? I've worked all of my life. Everything I've done has been in preparation for a future that no longer exists. And I have nothing to say about it. That's got to be very, very disheartening. So we need to keep that in mind when we're working with these patients. And feeding them is the one time we can have conversations where I'm not in a rush. This is the time you take to get to know your patients. Treat them like humans. Make sense? Let me show you this video. I do not have food to feed you. So I will show you this video. Let's see if I have a full screen here. No. Okay. Or we could watch Lorax. I know it's in here. So if you look at the bottom of the screen here, you'll see that this whole video takes 3 minutes and 45 seconds. It's not a very long skill.
Hello? Hi, Mr. Jones. My name is Patti. I'm your CNA today. Would you like a snack?
Yes, sweetie.
Okay, I'm gonna go wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. Can I ask you to sit up straight for me, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Jones, let me get you a hand wipe so that you can wipe your hands. Let's take that. Thank you very much. Let me just Can I offer you a clothing protector?
Yes, please.
Let's place this on your chest. Okay, it looks like we have pudding. How does that sound?
Great.
Very good. Can I offer you a drink before we get started?
Please. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
There you go. Do you have any plans for this afternoon?
No.
They're showing a movie on the big screen in the activity room. Would you like me to get more information on that for you?
Yes, please.
Okay. How does the pudding taste?
Delicious.
Very good. Ready for another?
Yes.
Can I offer you a drink? Would you like something to drink?
Yes, please.
Ready for another bite?
Yes, please.
Ready for another bite?
I'm actually,
Are you sure you wouldn't like just one more bite?
I'm okay. Thank you.
Can I get you something else in the kitchen?
No, thank you.
Okay. Let me know if you get hungry later and we'll get something to eat. We do have food available on the unit.
Thank you.
Going to take the napkin. Okay, I'll remove this clothing protector from you, and we're gonna put this in dirty linen. I'm going to go take care of your tray. I'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna place the tray back on your table. Is there anything else I can get for you? A magazine perhaps?
No, thank you.
Your call light is within reach. Please let me know if you should need anything. I'm going to go wash my hands and document.
Okay, thank you.
After washing my hands, I'm going to document the amount of food that this patient ate.
And the amount of fluid they drank. I forgot that voiceover.
Using my documentation form. I'll review the steps of my skill, make any corrections, and tell the evaluator my skill is done.
Test, is all that stuff going to already be on the tray?
Yep. So you will have, the tray will already be set up. You'll have pudding, napkin, spoon, and cup of water already there. At the end of the skill, you're just going to leave the tray. You're going to throw the disposables away, but leave the tray on the table. Because in a clinical setting, we have a cart out in the hallway that we're going to put the tray on. We don't have that in the test. So just leave it on the table. Okay. Good. It's been a long time since I fed him. That's my son.
I was wondering who it was. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this is a very awkward skill, guys. It's a very awkward skill to be a patient for. When we're kind of playing around, we can laugh it off, but in real life, this affects you psychologically, like seriously, because eating is the very first thing you become independent at. You learn how to hold a bottle long before you sit, stand, walk, crawl, or even know you're hungry. You know, even be able to recognize what hunger is. You're holding your own bottle. You're picking up Cheerios off a high chair tray and getting them in your mouth. We learn to eat before we master anything else. So when you lose the ability to feed yourself, it affects you psychologically. It produces a dependence like no other. People think that Pericare is the hardest skill to be a patient for. It's not. Feeding is. People tolerate Pericare way better than they tolerate being fed. And that's why we want to promote independence wherever possible. Finger foods, plate guards, adaptive utensils, whatever we can do to help the patient maintain that independence. They will always eat better feeding themselves rather than having somebody feed them. Does that make sense? Yeah. And it's super awkward, super awkward. Like I said, not so bad when you know it's fake. You're playing around, you're practicing, but for real, if you lose the ability to feed yourself for real, it's serious. It is very serious. But yeah, this is really hard for me because he's so much taller than me. So when I'm trying to feed him, I'm like way up here and I'm like, you used to be this big. This is way harder than it used to be. But yeah, he's a really, really good patient for me. And the reason that I use him in my really, really old videos, I'd use some other people, but everybody else is like, makes the video about them. It's main character syndrome, right? When you're on camera, you want to try to make it all, you ham it up. It's all about you. He's really good at not doing that, allowing the skill to be the star, not him. So, yeah, I'm getting ready to redo the videos and I just, broke the news to him. So
He's a handsome little fellow.
he's not real happy. He doesn't like being a patient for
And
this.
he's single, ladies.
He is single.
There you go. He's handsome.
He is single. All right. So any questions on feeding? Let's go to transfer from bed to wheelchair. So go to page 50 in your skills book for me. All right, so our care plan at the top of the page tells us to transfer the resident from bed into the wheelchair. The resident is unable to walk or take steps. Underline that, highlight it, put a star next to it. I don't care what you got to do, but unable to walk or take steps. This is the key phrase for this care plan. Because if you don't get the wheelchair close enough, when you're transferring a patient for the test and they have to take a step to keep from falling, you fail. Because care plan says they can't. So you got to make sure you get the wheelchair close enough for this one. It tells us they can stand with support though. They just can't walk. They can't take steps. So it's kind of like me with my knee, right? I can stand, but taking a step, that's a whole different ball game. So a gait belt or transfer belt is required to transfer the resident, and the resident will stay in the room. So this is a super short skill. I know that at the bottom of the page, I give you 11 minutes for this. It doesn't take 11 minutes. They give you way more time than you need. It's going to take me a fair amount of time to explain the wheelchair to you and safety and brakes and all that, but the skill itself, actually pretty quick. All right, so let's get into the wheelchair. Everything I'm going to talk to you about is on page 49. Remember, I always take the notes for you as well. So let's talk about brakes. If you look on the screen here, you'll see this is the wheel of the wheelchair. I'm going to show you in real life too, but this is the wheel of the wheelchair here. And right in front of the wheel is this metal L brace. This is the lever that controls the brake. When you pull the lever back on this model, every model's different. When you pull the lever back on this model, it pushes this lever into the wheel. So here you can actually see the lever is pushed into the wheel. This engages the brakes. To disengage the brake, you would push that lever forward and the metal bar would move away from the wheel. Not all wheelchairs work exactly like this. Some you pull the lever back, others you push the lever forward. If you get this skill for the state exam, they are going to show you how to work the wheelchair at the testing facility. I have two wheelchairs. I have this one and I've got the one in the back corner for you guys to practice with. The brakes are different on both of them. So it gives you an opportunity to see the differences. Wheelchairs are usually in the folded position for storage. Gets them a little bit smaller, takes up less room. To open a wheelchair, you lift up on the handles to get the big wheels off the floor so you have less friction and you just pull it apart. Just like that. If it doesn't open all the way, like that one's a little bit more finicky, it'll only open up about that far when you pull the handles apart. So to open it the rest of the way, you want to press down on those metal bars on the side to open it up the rest of the way, but don't put your fingers down there. Because if you've got your hands there, as it opens, it's going to pinch your hand. So I don't want to put my hands like this. I want to keep my fingers out of the way and push down on the seat. Now the brakes are here. And if I pull this brake back, it bites into the wheel and now it doesn't move. Same thing on this side. Now the wheelchair is locked. Wheelchairs should be locked if they're not actively moving. Floors are rarely level. You get a person in a wheelchair on an unlevel floor and they will start rolling. And the only thing that's going to stop them is whatever they run into, which could be another patient or a wall or a set of stairs. So wheelchairs should be locked when you're transferring a patient into them, when you're taking a patient out of them, and if they aren't currently in motion. That's not a restraint. Patients can reach down and unlock the wheelchair and go anywhere they want to go. It's not a restraint, but it is a safety measure. Good. Questions? All right. Wheelchairs are higher than other chairs. You can actually see this live pretty easily. See how much higher the wheelchair seat is than the chair? You can see it on here too. Significant height difference. That's because when you're sitting in a chair, we want your feet flat on the floor. When you're sitting in a wheelchair, we don't want your feet flat on the floor because the whole purpose is for us to be able to move you somewhere. If your feet are flat on the floor, I can't move you. So wheelchairs are higher on purpose. But what that does is it causes the legs to dangle, and dangling legs are never a good idea, because what that's going to do is this seat edge right here, this seat edge right there is going to press up into the backs of the knees. And that's going to trap fluid below the knees, blood. And it causes swelling. It can cause blood clots and nerve damage and all kinds of stuff. Bad circulation, because as that seat presses up into the backs of the knees, that's where all of your veins run from your lower legs. So it prevents that blood from returning to the heart. Not good. So anytime we have a patient in a wheelchair, we should have those foot pedals in place to support their knees or their legs, and the leg rests forward. So here you can actually see that right here. These leg rests are in the forward position and the foot pedals are down. Once you get the patient into the wheelchair, you need to do this to make sure their legs are supported. But you can't have all of this in the way when you're trying to put somebody into the wheelchair or take them out. So we got to get them moved out of the way. And that's what you see here with this wheelchair. You can see that the leg rests and the foot pedals are out of the way. In order to get them in the right position, once the patient is in the wheelchair, they simply swing forward and snap in place. You can hear that snap. Hear that snap? And then the foot pedals just fold down. I can put the feet on the foot pedals, patient's good to go. When I try to take the patient out of the wheelchair, though, I've got all this stuff in the way. I got to get it moved out of the way. So we want to fold those foot pedals up, but these are locked in place. So in order to release these so they swing out of the way, there's a little catch on the back right here. If you pull that catch, they swing out of the way. So that's what we heard with that snap. It's that catch locking in place. Okay. I'll show you one here. So the foot pedals out and the leg rests forward. That means that the wheelchair is supporting the feet. It should never be in this position unless somebody's in it. This position is the foot pedals up. It should never be, the wheelchair should never be in this position unless you're actively moving the foot pedals. This is the position we should be in when we're transferring into or out of the wheelchair. So leg rests out, foot pedals up. So this is transferring in or out. This is in transition when we're getting the leg rests and foot pedals in place. This is when the patient is in the wheelchair and the legs are supported. You may have a question on the state exam that gives you graphics like this and asks you, what is the proper position of the foot pedals when you're transferring a patient into or out of the wheelchair? And you would want to look for the one that has the foot rests, leg rests and foot pedals out. So positioning, when we are helping a patient from the bed to the wheelchair, we want to make sure that that wheelchair is super close to the bed. Remember, the patient cannot take steps. So the closer, the better. We want this part of the wheelchair almost touching the patient. When we get it in place, it's got to be at a slight angle. When we get it in place, we want to make sure that the brakes are locked so that wheelchair doesn't roll out from under us when we do the transfer. But remember, it needs to be at a slight angle, almost touching the patient. The patient should not have to take any steps. So just like when we did ambulate with a gait belt, when we lift that patient up and turn them, pivot them, we need to make sure that they can feel that seat behind them before we lower them down. But man, that can take a while, right? If I lift somebody up and turn them and then have to ask them, I'm supporting them. Do you feel the seat behind you? Yes, I feel the seat behind you. Okay, we're going to sit now. That's a long time. So what I do before I lift the patient up, I tell them, I'm going to lift you up and swing you around. When you feel that seat behind your knees, I want you to say, sit. So I'm going to lift you up, swing you around. When you feel the seat, you're going to say, sit. So when I lift them up and swing them around, they feel the seat, they say, sit, and we sit. It speeds the process up. And now I'm not holding that patient. So a little bit of cooperation from the patient goes a long way here, but you've got to tell them what you need from them. But this is a critical concept, guys. We have to make sure they can feel that chair behind them before we sit them down. Otherwise, they will unconsciously stiffen up and we're not going to be able to get them seated properly. You want to make sure once they're in the wheelchair that their hips are far enough back, you know, that you put the leg rests and the foot pedals down. The wheelchair's locked at the end. You want to make sure they have their call light, all of those things. But you already know this. The patient's feet hit the floor. We're going to talk about their shoes. Now, this skill, remember, just like ambulation, they're going to pick somebody to be your partner that is your body size or smaller. They're also going to look for somebody with slip-on shoes to make it a little bit easier for you. Now, if they can't find somebody with slip-on shoes that's your body size or smaller, then they'll, just kind of pick somebody that is your body size. That's kind of the key part here. They're not trying to get you to lift somebody that's significantly larger than you. But if they can find that sweet spot, they will make it a little bit easier because you have to put somebody's shoes on. You have to actually get down on the floor and put somebody's shoes on for this skill. Because our rule is, if their feet hit the floor, we talk about their shoes, and they're laying in bed, they don't have shoes on. So remember, slipper socks are never enough. When we put the gait belt on, we're going to have 4 fingers between the gait belt and the patient. Feet must be flat on the floor before we lift them. We're going to count to 3 before we lift them. We're going to ask them if they're dizzy or weak. And the patient must feel the chair. We're going to use those same proper body mechanics, 1 foot in front, 1 foot beside. Okay. All right, so here's our steps for transferring. We're going to pivot the patient to sit on the side of the bed. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. We're going to position the wheelchairs with foot pedals up and leg rests swung out at a slight angle, touching the bed. We're going to lock the wheelchair. We're going to pivot the patient into the wheelchair smoothly, and we'll ensure proper positioning. That's what we're doing here. Like I said, this does not take 11 minutes, not even close. Okay, good. Questions on this? Good. Okay. All right. I couldn't get this to I may have to do this manually. Okay. I ask you to come over here, take your shoes off, just leave them on the side of the bed. And let me just move that basket real quick. Now. It's fine. No, you're fine. You are fine. Just gonna move this table out of the way real quick. Okay. And I'm going to come over here and open that up. I'm gonna do a picture in picture. Oh. Hold on a minute, guys. There we go. Okay, so you should. Where is it? I don't know how. I was going to try to do the overhead view, but I can't. Okay, can you lay down on your back for me? All right, so I'm going to do this whole skill from beginning to end. I was going to try to do the overhead view, but you can watch the video for that as well. I will simulate hand washing for the sake of time here. Hi, Miss Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. How are you? Wonderful. Do you feel like getting up and into the wheelchair? Okay, I'm going to close your curtain. Let me go wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. I have clean hands. And I'm going to get the gait belt here. And I'm going to bring the wheelchair close enough to grab, but not so close that it's in my way, because I've got to get her swung around sitting on the side of the bed first. So I'm just going to bring it close. We'll go ahead and open it up. Oops. All right. Whoops. Okay, Miss Jones, I'm going to get you sitting on the side of the bed. Let me get that call light out of the way. So to do that, I'm going to ask you to scoot your whole body closer to me. So you're laying on your back on near the edge of the bed. You're going to cross your arms over your chest and you're just going to relax. Okay, just relax. Now I'm going to have a really wide base of support. So my feet need to be at least shoulder width apart. And I'm going to lean against the bed for leverage. So you want to make sure the bed is locked. I'm going to put my hand under the shoulders and over the knees. And on the count of 3, we're simply going to pivot to the side of the bed. It's a quick turn. Okay, let me just get my hand under there. Okay, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Good. Feel okay? Are you dizzy?
No.
Okay. Let me go ahead and put your shoes on. There you go. Your foot in there. And are your feet flat on the floor?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put this gait belt around you. This is going to help me get you into the wheelchair, provide a little stability, okay? So we're going to put this around your waist. We'll secure it through the first guard by the alligator teeth. And we want to check it with 4 fingers and then through the second guard. And now we're going to get the wheelchair close. We want it at a slight angle. And when I say close, I mean close. I wish I had the overhead view here for you. We're going to lock that wheel and then this one over here. You bring your feet together for me. You're going to put your hands on my shoulders. And on the count of 3, I'm going to lift you up and pivot you around. When you feel that seat behind your legs, I want you to say sit. And then I'll sit you down. Okay. So I'm going to lift you up, pivot you. When you feel the seat, say sit, and I'll sit you down. Okay. So you're going to put your hands up here. And on the count of 3, we're going to stand. 1, 2, 3. Sit. Good. Dizzy at all?
No.
So I'm going to take the gait belt off. And are your hips all the way back?
Yes.
Okay. Let me go ahead and have you lift your arm for me. Thank you. Move that. That's a danger waiting to happen. I'm going to unlock the wheelchair and I'm going to turn you around. So if you can lift your feet up for me, because we don't want you staring at a wall while you're waiting to go to breakfast. I'm going to bring that leg rest forward, lock the wheel. We're going to bring this leg rest forward and lock the wheel. And now I'm going to lift your foot. There we go. Always support from below with a flat palm. I'm going to lift this foot and put it on the footrest. Are you comfortable?
Yes.
Is there anything else I can get for you while I'm here?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Would you like a magazine while you're waiting?
No.
Call light is right there. Can you reach it?
Yes.
Good. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to call me. I'm going to put this away. Open the curtain. Make sure my environment is clean. Take a look around. Wash my hands. Think about my skill and make any corrections. My skill is done. Thank you. Good. Did not take 11 minutes. Not even close.
It's hard to be the patient
It is.
because you want to help, but you don't want to help, but you want.
Yeah. So yeah. So for the test, you're going to be told not to take steps, but it's hard. So you actually took a step. Yeah, you actually took a step. The evaluators would actually stop you and say, don't take steps. This needs to be a pivot transfer. Because our care plan says if your patient can take steps, they will. But our care plan says our patient can't. So any questions on that one? Not bad, right? Okay, we have one more skill to learn. That's it for today. Pericare. There's a bit of a lecture I need to give you, but we're going to take our break first. So come back at 11 and we'll get into Pericare and then you'll have the rest of the class to practice.
Just a quick question, was IPO not food by mouth?
Right, no food by mouth, no food or fluid by mouth.
So would that be like a feeding tube? Or
It would mean the patient probably got a test that's coming up or a procedure. So we don't want them to have any food or fluid in their system. It could also mean feeding tube, yes, but NPO is generally short term. For a procedure or something. But it can indicate long term as well.
okay.
Still got something.
I didn't see it.
Thought we don't heat from those.
Honestly, I got glasses on and I smoke.
Don't rush.
Yeah.
I do that stupid intermittent fasting, I'm getting so fucking hungry.
How's that going?
It just ain't working for me. People do it, and they, oh, I lost 10 pounds, I'm like. And I'm still eating healthy when I eat.
Yeah.
Coach says, maybe you're not eating enough. I'm like. You can only jam so much food into 7 hours or 6 hours, you know what I mean? Then I forget half of it. You gonna be able to stay and practice skills? Anything you wanna practice in particular?
I feel like I just wanna be given a skill and then see if I know it. Often. Instead of just being like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do this. The transfer, I don't need to do that, cause I did that on my own job.
How about the dressing or the baby?
Probably like partial,
Partial down?
yeah.
You wanna do that? Do that. Okay. Yeah, I need that. And dressing. Oh, no, I need, making a bed with somebody in it.
Okay.
How are you at that?
I'm good except for the folding the pillow behind.
She said that's a hard part.
Yeah.
Having them pillows in. I feel those are like the 3 that I really need to
Yeah.
get hands on. Oh, shit. I'm like stiff. I went to my massage therapist who tore my behind up.
Oh.
Oh, no.
Oh, your muscles are probably really sore.
He got me good. Then he was trying to scrape my biceps and I'm like, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
They didn't bruise this time though. Ooh.
Oh. Every time I get a massage, it feels good, but I really like my feet massaged. I'm like, let's just focus on my feet. I'll take a butt massage for an hour.
Just the scraping and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
After a while, then you get to like, you like lean into it on certain spots. Like, yeah, I better do that.
Yeah. Then there's other spots that are like knots. Like you can literally feel them trying to get that knot out.
I have one in my back right now, my lower back that is.
Ooh.
You can feel it.
Yeah.
And you try to be so still because if you flinch, you like,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
And it hurts.
and then you hear that door open where it keeps the scrapers and stuff.
Oh.
You're like, oh shit. He said, breathe. I need.
Yeah.
Mm. He has his work cut out. See that one. He's gonna make me cry. A couple times.
Only a couple.
Yeah.
I'm gonna love him more. I don't care. Not for my baby. I think about him. He's got the full time. Nail and hand food upon me. Occupied bed. I practiced that today. My patient's fine. Blood pressure.
You wanted to,
Girl, I wanna do all of them.
I'm having-
What are you talking about?
I know, right? I think,
I can't even do
I
something.
also
Changing
wanna
a
do
occupied
supporting
bed.
side play.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Sideline.
Definitely do anything. I can't even open it. I can't just be like, sit down. Like I just can't say that. Like, I just
You
get
will.
scared.
You will
But
when
like
you-
if I'm in a room with like a complete stranger, I know I can do it. It's like
with us.
not even like it's not we don't even know each other, but like I still like we've been in class together. Like it's just like it's awkward. It's
Yeah,
weird,
yeah, yeah.
Can't do it.
Okay, I'm gonna practice the point sidebar because that one I'm still like, okay, how am I doing that? Cause there's like 3 different
Pillows,
ways. Lateral and
or you have to have the head pillows between the knees and ankles. And then where's the other one?
the one under the
On the
arm.
arm.
You can apply for this test yet?
No, but I did the background. That's why I asked that.
Oh,
Because I
yeah.
thought that you had to wait for something before you apply. So I'm gonna do that.
That's in my phone. I put my phone, it didn't go through.
Did you
So-
go through?
That was the thing. I went to use my laptop last night and my laptop froze and died. I'm like, why am I gonna keep getting held back? It's so annoying. So now it's gonna take me forever. What did it do? You guys want to be your own?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I feel fine.
Good. Do you sell gatebolts by chance?
We sell them in the practice kits, but not individually. Yeah, I'm not, unfortunately, I'm not set up to do it individually. At some point I probably will, but I don't have one right now. You can look in a medical supply store too. That's way better than what I can get them for. Yeah.
You can buy some, you can find something else on the Amazon. We can help you.
Yeah.
Skills. Like we get 3 skills, but like what are the, so it's.
So you're going to have you're going to have one documentation skill, one ADL skill, which is bathing, dressing, grooming, feeding, or well, feeding is under documentation, but, and then one mobility skill, which would be transferring, ambulating, range of motion, sideline position. So that's how they divide them up. Page 17 of your book. Those are the care plan sets. So that's what the evaluators are going to give you, one of those 11 sets. And then the page right before it tells you how it's divided up. Oops. Sorry, I'm just right behind you real quick. I forgot it. There we go. Okay. So any questions on what we've gone over so far before we move on to Pericare? Turn to your books to page 110 for me. And let's take a look at the care plan. Excuse me, sorry. It's actually a pretty short care plan. It says the female patient has been incontinent of urine and needs perinatal care. It's often called Pericare, shortened Pericare, or just cares. The pad under the resident is wet, but the hospital gown and bedding is dry. That is a miracle. It never happens like that. Page 110. Yeah, it never ever happens like that. Usually the gown is wet, you know, the sheets are wet, and you have to change a whole lot more, but they're going to make this a little bit easier for you for the test. If you look at the bottom of the page, you're going to see that this is actually done on a mannequin. So you're going to talk to the mannequin like she's a real person. The evaluator will play the voice of the mannequin. So starting out, this mannequin is going to be on a pad. The care plan tells you that the pad is wet. It's actually not. It's a dry pad because the mannequin doesn't really go. So you're going to have to use a little imagination for this. But the mannequin is going to be laying on a pad. But let's think about that for just a second. Incontinent means the patient cannot control their urine and they're going to be wet all the time. I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. But what temperature did we say that the human body is? Okay, so 98.6. What did we decide room temperature was about, roughly? In the 70s. 75, 73, in the 70s. Clinical settings, probably a little bit cooler, probably around 70, 71, because they're always cold, but it's in the 70s, right? Well, urine is actually, because urine is made inside the human body, it's at least 98.6 degrees, but actually urine's a little bit warmer than that because urine is made kind of near our furnace area. So when urine comes out, it's about 100 to 101 degrees. Now, that 100-degree urine on the pad hits 70-degree air. Remember I said that air temperature always wins. You guys remember that? Air temperature always wins. So that's going to try to cool that urine down pretty quick. What do you think that pad's going to feel like under the patient? Cold, wet, maybe a little slimy, icky. If you were laying on that pad, what's the very first thing you'd want done? Yeah, change it. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to change the pad from under the patient to start. And then we're going to clean the patient's front, clean the patient's back. And then we want to change that pad out again before we leave them for the next couple hours. That's because we have a urine covered bottom on a clean pad. Once we get them all cleaned up, we want a nice clean pad under that clean bottom. Does that make sense? So this skill is going to require 2 pad changes, and we're going to clean the front of the patient and the back of the patient. But we're going to use all the rules that we've learned so far. We're also going to use that leaves method. So again, there's not much here for you to learn. We're going to recycle what we've already covered. Does that make sense? Good. Questions so far? Charting is not required on this one. So let's go back to page 107. And all the notes for everything I'm going to show you is on 107, 108, and 109. Those of you who are playing along at home, if you do not have the book, you probably should get the book because we refer to the book. And it will help you tremendously. Let's talk about what incontinence is. So in a normally function human being, you've got some kidneys. Those kidneys filter blood, pull out waste products, and produce urine. This happens 24 hours a day. Your kidneys never take time off. They don't go to sleep. They are always working, always. So it's a 24-hour day job. So it filters the blood, it removes the waste products, and it produces urine. Those urine drip down tubes called ureters. Drip, 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 drip. And they go into a Ziploc bag that we call the bladder. That's all your bladder is. It's a bag that holds. It's actually what bladder means, is a bag. So your bladder just holds those drips of urine because it's not convenient to live your life in the bathroom. Drip, drip, drip. We have a small valve at the bottom of the bladder that holds, closes, holds all that urine in there. Eventually, your bladder gets full. Little bell rings in your brain, says, hey, go find me a bathroom. I'm full. You go find a bathroom. You open that valve and the urine comes out. You're done going to the bathroom. The valve closes and now you're ready to go for many more hours as the urine continues to build in the bladder. Make sense? Everybody familiar with this process? Vague idea? 5th grade understanding? All right. So this is a normally functioning urinary system. When we have incontinence, what is broken here is the valve. Everything else still works. Kidneys still filter blood 24 hours a day, removes waste products, produces urine. That urine drip, drip, drip down ureters into the bladder. Unfortunately, there's nothing to keep the urine in the bladder. So where do these drips go? Out. So your incontinent patient is going to be wet 24 hours a day. Drip, 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 drip. If you have a patient who is dry, 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 really, really wet, you do not have an incontinent patient. That valve is working. That's why they're dry, 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 really, really wet. What you have are incompetent staff members who aren't getting the patient to the bathroom. And I don't know why this is common out there. This just makes me absolutely insane. CNAs will tell patients, just go. It's easier for me to clean you up than take you to the bathroom. That's horrible. It's criminal. You should never ask a patient to sacrifice their dignity for your convenience. If you got somebody that's dry, 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 you have incompetent staff members. Now, this is so important that the Joint Commission, who is the agency that oversees all healthcare facilities, they actually look at this. When a patient comes into a facility, I, as the nurse, have to do a head-to-toe assessment. I'm looking for all real problems and potential problems, right? Well, if I write down that the patient is continent, and while they're here staying with us, they become incontinent, unless there's a very good reason for that, with medical documentation and testing and procedures and all kinds of stuff, unless there's a really, really good, valid reason for that, when Joint Commission finds out, they're going to find the facility. And I'm okay with that, because staff members should not be asking patients to remove their dignity for convenience. Does that make sense? So this is a really, really big deal. Now, the thing is, sometimes incontinence does happen. In a lot of cases, this is a muscle. If I don't use a muscle, what happens to a muscle? Yeah, it gets all flabby and out of shape and doesn't do what you want it to do type thing, right? So this is a muscle. If I have a patient who is incontinent, we can actually, with a little bit of work on our part, get this muscle moving again, working. It's called bowel and bladder retraining. And what it means is we're going to get this patient up out of bed and to the bathroom on a toileting schedule at least every 2 hours around the clock, and do not miss your target. So if it says every 2 hours around the clock, you're getting them up at 2 a.m. and at 4 a.m. and at 6 a.m. and at 8 a.m. Don't put it off. Don't think I got to take all these people to the dining room before I get to the bathroom. No, it's got to be on a schedule, because what we're doing is training this muscle. Training the muscle. And then after we do that for a couple of days, we'll start extending the time out, where it's not every 2 hours, it's every 3, and then it's every 4, and then it's before meals. You know, it'll be on a schedule. But if you have somebody on a bowel and bladder training program, this schedule has to take precedence, because we're training that muscle. If you skip it, we go back to zero. We have to start over. But how great is that? To take somebody who's incontinent and wet all the time and be able to help them retrain that muscle so that they gain continence again. That's awesome. So we need to understand that when we have a patient who is incontinent, truly incontinent, they're going to be wet all the time, 24 hours a day. So incontinent patients are always going to be wet, but the problem is that adult urine is not like baby urine. In fact, baby urine, we don't even call it urine. We call it something cute like PP or TT or tinkle or, we have cute words for it because it's baby urine, right? But baby urine is different than adult urine because urine is produced based on what we eat. Your body excretes acid from the food that you eat, and that's what creates urine. Well, babies don't eat a lot of acid. They have formula or breast milk or, bland baby type food, right? So they don't have a lot of acid. So baby urine, way milder. You can put a diaper on a baby, put them to bed, wake up 8 hours later, and they still have skin on their tush. You do that with an adult, the acid in the urine is going to eat the skin. So when we have a patient who is incontinent, that means that we need to clean them and change them every 2 hours around the clock. We're waking them up at 2 a.m. We're waking them up at 4 a.m. Remember, I said that for the toilet training too, though, right? If we have a patient who's on a bowel and bladder training schedule, we're going to clean them and get them to the toilet at the same time. They're already up. Let's go to the potty and see if we can get this resolved. Let's talk about adult briefs real quick, though. Adult briefs, we don't call them diapers. Remember, we never treat an adult like a child. It's not a diaper. Sometimes you'll hear them called depends or pull-ups. They're going to hold in body heat, right? Because they're plastic lined. They're waterproof. So they're holding in body heat. They're blocking out light. And they're holding moisture right up against the skin because the moisture has nowhere else to go. This is warm, dark, moist on an epic scale. What kind of stuff grows in warm, dark, moist? Everything we don't like, all the bad guys. That's right. So not just UTI, although that's high on the list. You also have yeast infections, bacterial skin infections, all kinds of really bad things can happen here. So adult briefs are not always the right answer here. Now, certainly when the patient's out of bed, interacting with others, going to activities, going to meals, adult briefs are indicated because that's a dignity issue, right? We want to stay dry and presentable. We still have to clean and change them every 2 hours around the clock. But it's nice because it gives them that dignity, right? But there's a better way, because remember, this is warm, dark, moist on an epic scale. There's a better way if they're in bed. So out of bed, adult briefs are indicated. In bed, your care plan may have the patient open to air. That means that they're just laying on a pad. That pad is going to pull the urine away from the skin, allow light and air to circulate, so you don't have quite as many skin issues if they're open to air. How would we know which is which? Care plan. Yep. So we're going to use the leaves method for this. We're familiar with that leaves method. You're going to hold that washcloth. Just a plain square washcloth, fold it in half and in half again. But instead of looking at it like a square, we're going to look at it as a diamond. Free ends at the top. You're going to fold the side corner in on each side like this. We're going to wipe once. This is a one-way trip. We're always wiping from top to bottom. And then we're going to pull away and fold that over. We're going to wipe again, pull away, fold that over, wipe again, fold over, wipe again, fold over, and wipe again. So we have 5 independent cleaning surfaces, and we are going to use all 5. Let me show you how. So when we have a female patient, we are going to always wipe away from the urethra. And that's because bacteria want to get into the bladder. It is the ideal environment. Think about your favorite vacation place. That's what the bladder is for pathogens. It's warm, it's dark, it's moist. Yes, we have all that, but it also has an all-you-can-eat buffet and an open bar. There's enzymes and proteins that are in urine that make it easy for pathogens to procreate. Because we don't need little boy pathogens and little girl pathogens to make baby pathogens. It doesn't work that way. They literally eat the right things, the right enzymes and proteins. They zip themselves in half, and now we have 2. That 2 can do the same thing and turn into 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 528, 1024, and it just exponentially. So we want to try to prevent bacteria and other pathogens from entering the system where they can very quickly multiply. So to do that, we always want to go away from the urethra. So we're going to go right down the middle, kind of hold the labia open just a little bit to get right down the middle. The second stroke will be on the outside, down one side. Third stroke, other outside. We're going to fold that washcloth. Fourth stroke down the skin fold. So this is where the leg and the groin meet, that crease. We want to clean down that crease and the other side. So you can see we need all 5 areas of the washcloth for this. Whatever we wash, we rinse. So we're going to rinse the same way. Remember, always away from the urethra, never move back up. Good? Questions? Remember that pathogens are always trying to find a bladder to get into. It's our job not to bring pathogens right up to the doorway. We do have a few white blood cells that hang out in the area. Think of them as bouncers. And when pathogens try to get into the system, that white blood cell will say, no, you don't belong, and get rid of it. Works well. As long as we don't have a whole busload of pathogens. Some of them are going to get by our bouncers. So we want to try to wipe away from the urethra to reduce that contamination. Yes.
Do we soak each leaf?
Yes. You want to soap each leaf. Very good. Very good. So to do Pericare, we're going to change that chucks to begin with to make the patient comfortable. We're going to use the leaves method. We're always going to clean from front to back. We're going to clean down the middle, the outer labia on each side, and the skin fold on each side. We'll never move back up. Remember, it's a one-way trip. We're going to turn the patient on the side to clean the back side. And we want to go from the anal opening upward. And then we're going to change that chucks again. So these are our steps that we need to make sure that we're hitting for the state exam. Oops. So let me show you the video on this one. I am going to show you the video. It has good close-ups, which is important on this one. And it's not a hard skill. It's actually not even really a long skill, although they give you like, 18 minutes to do it, or 17. Yeah, they give you a ton of time to do this. It really isn't a hard skill, but you've got to get over your own emotional reaction to it. And that can be difficult sometimes. There it is. So you can see here, I get this done in 11 minutes. Notice at the beginning of every one of these videos is the care plan that you have in your book. It's also the care plan from the state exam.
Questions? My name is Patti. I'm your CNA today. How are you? Wonderful. I need to do Pericare. Is that okay? Okay, let me close your curtain, wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to start out with a barrier. This gives me a clean place to place my clean supplies. So I'll place the barrier on the overbed table. And now I'll start gathering my supplies. I'm going to need 2 cups, 4 washcloths, a privacy blanket, a towel. I'll place these items on the overbed table. I'll need a basin and soap. And I'm going to need a set of gloves. Okay, Ms. Jones, let me go fill the basin. I'll use a paper towel to turn the water on. Warm. Not hot, not cold, just warm. Ms. Jones, would you like to check the water temperature and make sure it's okay? It's good? Good. I'll place my washcloths in the water. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm going to place this privacy blanket over you. This is gonna help keep you warm and protect your privacy while we do this skill. I'm gonna spread the blanket out, being careful not to shake it or snap it. And then I'm gonna pull your sheet down to about your knees. Now I'll get my chucks ready for use. I'm going to unfold the chucks, fold it up lengthwise and roll it toward me. And I'll repeat that with the second one. Clean rolls toward me, dirty rolls away. Now I'll get my gloves on. Okay, Ms. Jones, in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to scoot toward me. And we're gonna roll you onto your left side so I can change the chucks that's under you. I'll place one of the chucks on the bed. Ms. Jones, could you scoot toward me, please? Thank you. And roll up on your left side. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to roll the dirty chucks toward the patient. Tuck it under her hip. Unroll the clean one. And tuck it under the soil. Ms. Jones, can you roll back onto your back, please? Thank you. And scoot to the middle of the bed. Okay, I'll come around to the other side of the bed now. Ms. Jones, can you scoot toward me, please? And roll up on your right side. 1, 2, 3. We'll remove the soil tucks from the bed and unroll the clean one. This is going to be thrown away. Okay, Ms. Jones, we're going to start cleaning now. I'm going to roll your blanket up to about your waist. This is going to expose you. Please let me know if you're uncomfortable in any way. So I'll roll the blanket up. And on the way, I'm going to try to get that down rolled inside the blanket so that exposes only the period area. I'll cover her upper legs with a towel. And then get my first washcloth. I'm gonna wring this out. And soak 5 corners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm gonna clean now. I'll use the heel of my hand at the top of her peri area and my index and middle finger to spread her slightly open so I can clean down the inside middle, top to bottom. And then we'll fold that leaf over. We're gonna clean the outside labia, top to bottom, down one side and fold that over. The third leaf will clean the other side of the labia, top to bottom, fold that leaf over. The fourth leaf is gonna clean this area between the leg and the groin, the skin fold, top to bottom. We're gonna fold that over and we'll repeat it on this side, top to bottom. Now we'll place the washcloth back on the barrier. The second washcloth, we're gonna wring out. And we're gonna rinse all of those areas the same way we washed. So we're gonna hold her slightly open to clean down the middle, top to bottom. Fold that over. We're gonna rinse down one side of the labia, top to bottom. Fold that over. Rinse the other side of the labia, top to bottom. Fold that over. We're going to rinse the skin fold down one side, top to bottom. Fold that over. And the other skin fold, top to bottom. We'll set that aside. Now we're going to dry all of those areas using short, soft strokes or a gentle pat. I'm going to unroll the blanket, which will place her down back over her legs. Okay, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to scooch you toward me now, and we're gonna roll you onto your left side so I can clean your back side. We're gonna scoot toward me, and we're gonna roll you over onto your left side. 1, 2, 3. The evaluator will hold the mannequin in place for you to complete your cleaning of the patient's backside. Okay, I'm going to take the 4th washcloth, bring it out really well. And we're going to soak 4 corners. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to start at the anal opening and go up the center crease, right up the middle, and we'll fold that leaf over. The second leaf will clean 1 buttocks. We're going to fold that over. The third leaf will clean the other side of the buttocks. We'll fold that leaf over. And the fourth leaf will clean from the anal opening up the center crease 1 last time. We're going to set that aside. Whatever we wash, we rinse. So I'll bring that out. And I'm going to rinse the same way we washed. So from the anal opening up the center crease, fold that over. 1 buttocks, fold that over. The other side of the buttocks, fold that over. And once more up the center crease. And then we'll dry all of those areas. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm going to change that pad out from under you. So you're on a nice clean pad. We'll roll the soiled chucks toward the patient and tuck it under her hip. Unroll the clean chucks and tuck it under the soil. Ms. Jones, come on back, please. And scoot to the middle. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Jones, go ahead and scoot toward me. And roll up on your right side. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. We'll remove the soil chucks from the bed. And unroll the clean. Okay. Go ahead and scoot back to the middle, please. This is going to be thrown away. Okay, Ms. Jones, I need to put all of my soiled items away and clean my basin. I'll be back in just a moment to get you situated. These items will go in dirty linen. And the basin is going to be cleaned the same way we clean everything else. We'll dump the water into the sink. Rinse the basin. Take it up with a paper towel and dry the inside. We'll discard that paper towel. We'll dry the outside. And discard that paper towel. And then we'll get the soap. I'll use the paper towel to open it for. And store the basin back inside. These paper towels will now be thrown away. Barrier is going to be disposed of. And now I can remove my gloves. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm now going to gather the privacy blanket up and pull your sheet back up. So I'll collect the privacy blanket by lifting from the bottom or underside of the blanket. Then pull the sheet up and ball the blanket up into a ball. That way no trailing edges will contaminate other surfaces. Okay, Ms. Jones, let me go put this in 30 minutes. Is there anything else I can get to you while I'm here, like a magazine? Okay, here's your call light. If you should need anything at all, please let me know. I'm going to go open your curtain and wash my hands. After washing my hands, I'll think about the steps of my skill, make any corrections, and then let the evaluator know my skill is done.
All right, any questions on that? Questions? All right, here's your review sheet for today. Are these review sheets helpful for you? They're also on our inside the course. The very first lesson is the live stream on the course. And on the live stream page has the review sheet if anybody wants to download it and use it. All right, so I had a couple questions here I want to get to before I open it up for practice. Let me go back up here. Good morning to everyone. Noise, I'm not real sure what exactly you're asking. I know you have a language barrier, but you're asking about the written test and the clinical. If you can type in an actual question, something that I can help you with. If you're looking to help with the written test, the ebook that I have on my website will help you tremendously. Watch the animated videos. If you're looking for instruction on the skills test, watch the skills videos. I also am going to be hosting a practice test game show on YouTube. It will probably start, I would say, in about 3 to 4 weeks. I'm currently writing some questions for the pilot. And it's totally interactive. So I'll have a question on the screen. You'll actually type in the chat what you think the answer is. It's going to accumulate points, and I'm going to give out prizes. So that'll be fun getting ready for the written test as well. But Brittany has several questions here. Brittany says, after rinsing, should we set the basin down in the sink and grab the paper towel when it was in our hand the whole time? Wouldn't pathogens from our hands be on it already? So the answer to this, Brittany, is I actually cover this I have a animated video on basin cleaning. So you'll want to watch that to really try to understand this whole workflow. But for the test, all we have to do is rinse, dry, and store. You don't need to use the paper towels to pick it up. You don't have to set it down. That's not required for the test. You're simply going to rinse it, dry it, and store it. And the whole point here is that each one of those basins are single patient use. So if Mrs. McGillicuddy gets the basin, Mrs. McGillicuddy is the only person that's going to use the basin. It's hers and hers alone. And it's just like your sink at home. You'll rinse it out, but you don't have to disinfect it every time somebody uses it. Now, the process that you see in the videos, however, rinse the basin, set it down, and then pick it up with a paper towel. That is specifically designed for disinfection. So if you put the basin down, you can't be holding it while you're disinfecting it. So if you set it down and then spray it, now it's disinfected. You need a paper towel to pick it up. You want to dry the inside with a paper towel and the outside with a different paper towel because you don't want that cross contamination. And as long as you're drying the inside first, it's okay. But some people will pick it up and dry the outside first and then the inside, and that kind of undoes all of your disinfection. So the rule is, if you're going to disinfect it, you're going to set it down to disinfect it, and then use a paper towel to pick it up. Paper towel to dry the inside, different paper towel for the outside, and then one more for the drawer. And Brittany also asks, isn't there more pathogens in the bottom of the sink when we washed our hands? So this is what we're trying to do here is clean, not sterile. And that's a very big distinction to make. Yes, the inside of the sink may not be overly, how do I put this? It's not contaminated, but it's not really considered clean either because you've got soap running in it. So it's not contaminated, but not clean. But by putting that basin down in the sink, it allows you to disinfect the inside, which is what's ultimately being used for the patient care portion. So again, we're not trying to go for sterile. We're just trying to go for clean. Wherever you work, you're going to have a policy and procedure on this. They're going to tell you at your facility how they want things handled. And this may vary patient to patient too. So if I were running a facility, I would simply have all patient care items rinsed, dried, and stored, just like what you're doing for the test, because we don't really need to go through all of the disinfection process. But if one of my patients is on chemo, well, that changes things because now we've actively destroyed their immune system. I don't want them exposed to anything. So that care plan may have disinfection of patient use items in a very specific way. I may say, set the basin down in the sink to spray the inside, pick it up, and then spray the outside. So that care plan is where we get patient-specific information. The policy and procedure is where we get general facility information. Care plan always trumps the policy and procedure. So policy procedure is general, care plan is specific to the patient. I hope that helps you guys. So let's see here. I have a question pertaining to today. What should we do if the patient has a back injury and cannot sit up straight for feeding? How would we go about that scenario? Well, again, you would go by your care plan for that patient. So if the patient has a scoliosis and the curvature of the spine is so significant that they can't sit up, they're permanently in this position, well, the care plan would tell you how to accommodate that patient and feed that patient safely to make sure that there's no issues. So your default is always going to be care plan for specifics, policy and procedure for general, and nurse for everything else. So if the care plan doesn't indicate, you need to go to the nurse and find out from them how they want you to accommodate, because ultimately the nurse is always responsible for the care of the patient. So check with the nurse if you're at all unsure if either the policy and procedure or the care plan isn't clear. And what happens if you happen to need more washcloths due to more stool being present while the patient is on their side? We actually talked about this in class on Monday, that if you don't have enough supplies, you're not graded on supplies. So you want to go back and watch Monday's class. So that would have been class number 5. Make sure you go back and watch class 5. But nutshell answer here, very short answer, is that you're not graded on supplies. You can go back and get any supplies you need at any time, but you cannot reach into a clean supply cabinet with soiled hands or soiled gloves. So you must remove your gloves if you're wearing them, wash your hands, get your new supplies, and then when you're ready to resume, then you would re-glove and proceed. So my class 5 will go into that as well. All right, guys, anybody online on YouTube have any other questions? Are there any other questions? Thank you, Natalia. I appreciate that. That was very sweet. Any other questions? If there's no other questions, oh, good, Brittany. I'm glad. Brittany understands. If there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and close out the live stream portion so the classroom students can practice the skills that they've learned. Those of you joining from YouTube World, if you're not practicing, during this practice time, make sure you're practicing at some point, because you're not going to be successful on the test if you haven't practiced. Hey guys, if you found any value in this live stream, let me know by giving me a thumbs up, because if we're not, I've got 17 people on there live streaming this. If this is a lot of effort for us to go through and a lot of expense, with the servers and stuff. So if I kind of need to know, are you guys finding this helpful? Is this helping you, this live format? If it is helping you, make sure you give me a thumbs up so I know that, so we can continue that. If we don't get a whole lot of feedback from you guys in YouTube World, I'm going to assume that you don't really like it. So I won't keep it up. So the like button is for you to tell me whether this is helpful for you, so I know whether to continue it or not. Make sure you stay tuned. Tomorrow I do my live, and we're going to talk a lot tomorrow about what to do if the patient refuses, how to communicate with cognitively impaired individuals, that type of thing. It's going to be a really interesting show. And stay tuned for the practice test game show coming up shortly as well. Both classroom and YouTube people, if you have the book, this book on page 142 is a practice test. I don't want you to take it until I'm done with you, but I am done with you next week. So you need to be aware that there is a practice test for you guys to be able to evaluate how ready you are for the state exam. The answer key is in the back. What's interesting about this is my students tell me that my practice test is actually a little bit harder than the state exam. So if you do well on my practice test, you will have no problem on the state exam. Just remember everything that I've told you. We never treat adults like children. Dignity is extremely important. Safety is key. Resident rights, understanding the principles, and understanding the changes that you're going to see in residents, what's normal and what's not, so you know what to report. All right. Any final questions before I open this up for practice? I also have a practice test on my website as well, on foryourcna.com. Lots of resources for you guys. Lots of stuff. I know I probably overwhelmed you with everything that I've given you and all the resources that you have. But remember that you do have the ebook that will help you on the written test. You've got the practice test. You have all of the video resources. Those of you that are in my class, you have the online program as well, which allows you. That online program is super cool because like Pericare, the first thing that you're going to see under the video is a supply shelf. So you have to get the supply. You actually have to click on the supplies that you need. And if you don't click on the right supplies, it's going to tell you. And so it allows you to choose your supplies. And then below that is a drag and drop where all of the steps are there in picture form, and you have to put them in the right order. So it allows you to actually do the skills without physically doing the skills. But that's really, really helpful if you're kind of unsure about your supplies or the steps. It allows you to kind of practice and build that confidence before you get up and actually try to do it on your own. Okay. So that online, if you haven't accepted the invitation to the online program, you're going to want to go back into your email and do that as well. Thank you, Mai, for posting that link. And Miriam, if you go on to, oh, thank you, Miriam. If you go on to courses.foryourcna.com, that's courses, courses.foryourcna.com. Under lesson 1, you'll see the live stream. The handout is there. You can go get the handout for the class there. All right. Thank you, Miriam. I appreciate it. Okay, guys, I'm going to end the live stream and open this up for the students in the classroom to practice. I hope to see you guys back on Monday. We're here Mondays and Wednesdays from 9 to 1 for 4 weeks. And hope to see you next week. Until next time, happy caregiving. Bye.